Hello, my friends, and it is time for the next portion of chapter 9 of Let the Circle Be Unbroken. So here we go. It was late when the dogs started barking, and Dubé and Russell came hammering at the door, waking us up. They sat before the fireplace, Dubé saying nothing, Russell telling us that they had just seen the house where the Union men stayed set afire. "You know, I was going over there with Dubé," Russell said. "Well, when me and Dubé got over there late this afternoon, Mr. Wheeler and Mr. Moses and another colored fella and 2 more white Union men was there. Dubé, he told them I was interested in the Union, and they seemed real pleased to talk to me about it. Offered us coffee, and we sat on into the night talking. Then about 9 o'clock, me and Dubé, we decided we better get on home, and we left. But before we got to the road, we seen headlights coming down the road real fast. We didn't like the look of it, so we jumped off in the bushes." "What, was they night men?" I asked. Mama looked back at me but didn't say anything. Russell shook his head. "Don't know exactly who they was. They wasn't masked or nothing. Just got out of them cars and set that place afire. Burned it down." "Lord, no," moaned Big Ma. "What about the Union men?" said Mr. Morrison, who had come up as soon as the dogs had started barking. "Wheeler and Moses and the rest. They get out?" "Believe they did, 'cause I heard one of them burners yell something about folks slipping out the back door, and a bunch of 'em took off after and hollering about there wasn't going to be no socialist union down in here. That's when Dubé and me decided we better slip off, but we couldn't much risk the road, 'cause they had a car going along it slow, seeing if anybody was on it. We stayed along the creek till we couldn't hear 'em no more. Then after that we waited a long time before coming out, afraid they was playing possum. Finally we slipped out, coming along the edge of the woods. We was going to try and make it home, but we seen lights again, and we decided we best get inside somewheres. Y'all's place was the closest we could think of. Y'all don't mind. We figured to stay here a while before going on." Mama decided that it was too late for them to think about it going anywhere farther tonight, and she and Stacey set about making pallets for them on the floor in the boys' room. Meanwhile, Big Ma fussed over Russell, whose arm had been badly scratched during the flight. Russell assured her that he could hardly feel it, but Big Ma insisted that she put some antiseptic on it. "Now you just take that ripped shirt on off. I'll sew it up first thing in the morning." "Oh, Miss Caroline, you ain't gonna—" "I know I ain't, but I wants to, so you just go on and get at it and give it to Susella there and let me get to that arm." Russell looked back over his shoulder. "Susella, I didn't see you there. Sorry to be waking you up." When she didn't speak, he grinned good-naturedly and took off his shirt, exposing his bare chest, and handed it to her. Wordlessly, she looked at him and then took the shirt and returned to the bedroom. After I'd said good night to both Dubé and Russell, I followed her in, and as soon as the door was closed, I let her have it. "You could have at least said good night to Russell. It wouldn't have hurt you none." She jumped, startled by my entrance. She had been staring at the shirt, holding it close to her. Now she laid it carefully over a chair and slipped into bed, while I got down on my pallet where I had been sleeping since she had come. Along with everything else, I greatly resented the fact that she had taken over my side of the bed, and when I had fussed about it, Big Ma had said that I could still sleep in the bed if I wanted to, in the middle. But seeing no reason why I should be sleeping in the middle when it was Susella who was the intruder, I had chosen the pallet. "Russell's my friend," I continued to grump. "Everybody like him." "Cassie." "What?" "Let's not talk about it." I started to say, "Yeah, let's talk about it," but realized before I said it that I didn't really want to talk about it either. I supposed I simply wanted to talk, to keep men who carried fire and wandered the roads in cars with headlights that shone like cat eyes in the night from crawling into my sleep. They had done it before. No doubt they would do it again. I sighed helplessly and turned my back to Suzella. There was no keeping them out. Talk of the burning spread as quickly through the community as if it had been the fire itself, and people got the message. Without Morris Wheeler and John Moses and the other union members, courage fizzled, and the integrated meeting which was to have taken place did not. It was uncertain what had become of the union men, but everyone knew that they had been run out, though no one seemed to know where they were now. Then John Moses' body was found in a creek bed near Smelling's Creek. They think they's gonna bust up union by killing Mr. Moses, said Dubé, who took the death hard. But they can't nothing but bust up the union now. They'll see. Life settled down again. The days passed, dry and hot, good growing weather for the cotton after the heavy spring rains. Papa wrote often. His letters sounded cheery, but we could read the loneliness in them. He said he was looking forward to coming home for Revival Sunday in August. He said, too, that work on the railroad had not been going well. He was no longer working a full 6-day week, but only 2 or 3 days, or whenever there was work. Still, 3 days' pay was better than no pay at all, and he stayed on. Each time Papa wrote, he asked about the cotton. Mama wrote back that the cotton looked good, and it did. Yet despite how good it was looking, Mama, Big Ma, and Mr. Morrison seemed worried. Stacey was worried too. One burning hot afternoon, when every person with good sense should have been sitting under a shade tree somewhere, I saw him walking the rows, his head bent to the cotton. I followed behind him. "What you studying on so hard?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. I waited. He peered at one of the plants and, sitting on his haunches, broke off a bowl and opened it up. The cotton had begun to form. He held it over for me to see. "See that, Cassie?" "What?" "Them fibers. They're going to be long, staple white." "Well, that's good," I said. "Yeah, it's mighty good. Might be one of the best crops we done had." "Then how come you look so worried?" "'Cause as good as it is, we ain't going to get near about what it's worth. And what we do get, it ain't going to be enough." Stacey looked across the fields to the acres planted in alfalfa that should have been planted in cotton. "We'd have been able to plant them other acres there, things wouldn't have been so bad. Or we'd have had a contract and they'd have paid us for them acres we ain't using." I followed his gaze. "We made out last year," I reminded him. "And we lost part of them acres anyway 'cause of the fire, and we ain't had Papa's railroad money or Mama's scrip most of the year. But Uncle Hammer was able to help then. Now he got to repay the money he borrowed to buy the land clear from the bank, so ain't got much to give this year. Not only that, because of the way things been, we had to buy on credit from that store in Vicksburg. And you know that's something Mama and Papa and Big Ma always tried to keep from doing, but we ain't had no choice. A good part of the crop gonna have to go paying the store debt. And Cassie, there's always them taxes on the land." That scared me. We grew quiet, and in our silence all the sounds of the day seemed louder. A bee zoomed past trumpeting its presence, and a dragonfly spun in rapid delight over our heads, then flew on in happy celebration. I shaded my eyes with my hand and looked out over the land. The forest, deep greens and shades of brown, the fields looking like a patchwork quilt of growing things, the house, the orchard, the meadowland, where as much a part of me as my arms, my legs, my head. There couldn't be life without them. The look on Stacey's face told me he felt the same. "Been thinking," he said. "Been thinking maybe I can get me a job." "Like the last time?" I said dryly. "Boy, you and Mama done been through that business before." "Ain't gonna ask Mama. She still think of me too much like a baby. Papa most likely be home come Revival Sunday, and that ain't so far off now. I'm gonna talk to him about it then. He'll understand." I thought on that and agreed. "He say you can get a job. Where about you gonna find one?" "Somewhere around here. 'Member Harrison, he just up and offered me one." "Boy, that job been gone." "Most likely, but I figure I can find something." "Gotta." "Stacey, Cassie, Mama, she say y'all come here," little man hollered from the back porch. Stacey stood and wiped his hands together to remove the dust. "Cassie, do me a favor, huh?" "What's that?" "Don't say nothing to Mama or nobody about me thinking about a job, huh? She just be getting all upset, and I'd just rather talk to Papa about it first. All right?" I looked up at him, wondering if he realized how good it felt to have him confiding in me again. "All right," I said. When we reached the front yard, we found Christopher John sitting under the chinaberry tree, his knees pulled to his chest and his head buried against them. "What's the matter with you?" I said. He looked up. He had been crying. "What's the matter?" Stacey repeated. "Mr. Morrison, he brung a letter from Papa." "Did?" cried Stacey. "Just now?" Christopher John nodded. "Then what you crying about?" I questioned. Papa say he ain't coming home for a revival." An awful feeling shot through me, and my stomach sank. Without looking at me, Stacey started toward the house. I followed. Inside, Mama read Papa's letter to us without emotion. Then she put it away and did not speak of it again. All of us understood why Papa thought it better that he stay where he was to earn as much money as he could whenever he could work. But understanding did not take away the loneliness. We missed him so. Stacey wandered off alone after he heard the letter. I watched him, wondering what he was going to do about that job of his now. August came, and all of us, including Suzella, went to the fields, dragging the cotton bags at our sides. Through the long days from sunup to sundown we worked, bending and picking and stuffing the cotton into our bags. Soon the days of August passed into September, and Mr. Morrison made an overnight trip up to Vicksburg to sell our first load of cotton. He took Stacey with him. When they got back late the next day, they reported that cotton prices were the same in Vicksburg as they were in Strawberry. Mama sat silently thinking. "And they're not any higher than they were in August?" Mr. Morrison shook his head. "They steady. But you know you can't never tell. They could rise or fall." Mama pursed her lips and looked at Big Ma. "I think we ought to wait until near the end of the month before selling any more of the cotton and see how prices are then." Both Big Ma and Mr. Morrison nodded, confirming their agreement. Mama looked at Stacey. "What do you think, Stacey?" If Stacey was surprised that Mama had asked his opinion, he didn't show it. "I think that's the best thing, too," he said. Mama kept her eyes on him a moment, then nodded. "All right, then. Come the end of the month, we'll take the cotton into Strawberry." On the last Friday in September, when we came from the fields, Mr. Morrison and Stacey put the sideboards on the wagon. The sideboards were regular plank boards which fitted neatly on top of all four wagon sides, making the wagon's interior deeper and allowing it to hold some 1,500 pounds of cotton. We loaded the cotton, packing it tightly until the wagon was filled, then covered the top with the tarpaulin and fastened it down. The next morning, Mr. Morrison hitched up both Lady and Jack. Then he and Mama climbed onto the wagon seat, and Stacey and I climbed on top of the cotton bed. Frankly, I was surprised that I was going. I had pointed out to Mama several times that Stacey had been allowed not only to observe business since he had been 10, but to take care of some of it as well. I supposed I had finally convinced her that my education in practical matters was just as important as his. After all, she had to run the farm and sell the crops. Perhaps I would too someday. It was still early when we reached the Granger Walker mill to have the cotton ginned. Not yet 6 o'clock. Already wagons had begun to gather, and more than 15 were ahead of us, their occupants taking the time before the mill opened at 7:30 to catch naps on top of the cotton or stretch their legs in the dawning light. Here there were no segregated lines. There was only one large barn door-like gate opening to the mill and one road leading into it. It was simply a matter of first come, first served. At 7:30 exactly, the huge door swung open and Stuart Walker, his father Hamden, and Pearson Wells stepped out. At the sight of Stuart, anger snapped alive in Stacey's eyes. I saw it. So did Mama. "Not a word, do you hear?" she quietly told him. "Not one word." Stacey sucked in his breath and looked away. The ginning of cotton was a slow process, and it was after 12 o'clock when we reached the entrance. "How do there, Mary?" Stuart said as we pulled up. I saw Mama bite her lower lip before she spoke. I bit my lip as well, remembering that Mama had told me to keep my mouth shut. But it was hard. Mama was a good 14 years older than Stuart, and for her to have to show him respect when he did not do the same for her was galling. There was a strange smirk on Stuart's face as Mama answered. I was afraid he was going to say something about Suzella, but he didn't. He waved us into the mill. Their pipes were placed inside the uncovered wagon, and the cotton was sucked into a machine which cleaned the cotton, then removed the seeds from it. Afterward, the cotton was cleaned once more and funneled into a green ginning press, which compressed it into 500-pound bales. Our cotton came to one bale, a neat rectangular package, covered on two sides with burlap and held together by iron bands. Mama paid the ginning charge, then the seeds from the cotton and the bale of cotton were loaded onto the wagon, and we headed to the warehouse where the cotton buyers were located. As we pulled into a place at the end of a long line, we spied Mo Turner, standing some ways off, staring at the buyers in the open fields surrounding the warehouse. "Hey, Mo!" Stacey called. "Mo! What y'all doing here?" Mo looked up, somewhat surprised. We all knew that he wasn't in town to sell cotton. Sharecroppers like the Turners were not allowed to sell their own cotton. At the end of each day, they took their cotton to the plantation center and turned it over to Mr. Montier, who saw to its ginning and sold it as well. Whatever money, if any, Mr. Montier felt was due to the sharecroppers was then given to them after all the deducts had been figured. Mo came over to the wagon and greeted us. "Papa had some errands to run in town, so me and Elroy come along with him. Y'all getting ready to sell y'all's cotton, huh?" "That's right," Mama said. "Top price going at 11 cents a pound." Mama nodded. "That's what we heard." "Ain't enough," said Mo. "It's more'n it was 2 years ago," said Mr. Morrison. "Yes, sir. Say, Stacey, could you come here a minute? I got something to show you." Stacey jumped off the wagon. As I jumped off after him, Mama warned us not to go far. At the end of the field which circled the warehouse, Mo stopped. "Look here, Stacey, I done made up my mind." He looked at me and then pulled Stacey away. "Come with me a minute, will you?" The way Mo had looked at me, I knew I wasn't wanted. So I let them go without protest and returned to the wagon. As I neared it, I saw that Mr. Granger had come up and taken it upon himself to pull a handful of cotton from our bales to inspect it. Mama stood beside him. "It looks good, Mary," he said after a moment. "Long staple. Clean, strong, mighty good." "Thank you, Mr. Granger." "Y'all'll get top price for it." We're hoping so. Of course, 11 cents a pound don't hardly compare to the 35 cents a pound we got in 1919. Surely don't. Still, it's better than we have had. That's very true, Mr. Granger. Mr. Granger let his cotton sample drop to the ground. I heaved an angry sigh, but of course I could say nothing. Neither could Mama. Now, even though the prices are some better, Mary, you and me both know they ain't enough to keep y'all going. I know the kind of bills y'all got. My offer to buy y'all's place still stands. Same as last year. Well, we appreciate your concern, Mr. Granger, but we still aren't thinking of selling. Mr. Granger shrugged. Well, it's up to y'all, he said, then glanced up at Mr. Morrison, whose eyes had never left him, and walked back toward the warehouse. Get in the wagon, Cassie, Mama said. A pent-up rage was in her voice. I knew now was not the time to express my comments on Mr. Granger. I climbed onto the wagon without another word and waited. When the cotton had been sold and we headed down the main street of Strawberry in the empty wagon, we met the Turners on their way out. Glad to have the company along their journey home, we trailed the Turners as far as the Wallace store. There, as the Turners continued west toward Smelling's Creek, Mo called to Stacey. See you tomorrow. You coming to church at Great Faith, Mo? Mama asked. I'll be down that way, yes, ma'am, Mo said, after a moment's hesitation. Bright and early. See you tomorrow then, Mo, I cried as our wagon turned south and headed for home. The sounds of late summer were in the air. We sat for a while on the front porch, enjoying the last taste of the long day, and finally, as the moon rose full and yellow overhead, Mr. Morrison stood and said good night. Stacey jumped up and walked out into the yard with him, and the rest of us went into the house. While Susella dallied with Mama and Big Ma in the other room, I made up my palette, then returned to Mama's room where Big Ma sat doing some late evening darning, and Mama and Susella were writing letters. As I entered, Stacey came through the side door, and for a moment he just stood there. Then he did a strange thing. He walked over to Mama, sitting at the desk, and kissed her. Then did the same thing with Big Ma. Good night, he said. Mama looked up from her letter. Good night, honey. See you in the morning. Stacey crossed to his room, looked back once more, and softly closed the door. Lord, I don't remember the last time that child kissed us good night, said Big Ma, smiling, obviously pleased. That was sweet, wasn't it? And now, Miss Cassie, don't you think it's time you were saying good night, too? What about Susella? Good night, Cassie, Mama answered with a lilt to her voice. I said good night and went back to my room. I changed into my nightgown, then turned the lamp low and headed for the pallet. But just as I slipped under the covers, Stacey called to me from the porch. Grumbling, because he had waited until I was already lying down, I got up and crossed to the door and pulled the latch. Stacey stood there, his penknife in hand. Boy, I thought you went to bed. I'm going in a minute. I just wanted to give you this, he said, and extended the knife toward me. I studied him suspiciously. What make you want to give it to me? Just do, that's all. Well, you said you wanted it. You still do? Yeah, I want it. Well, take it then. I took the knife and held it gingerly, not quite believing it was mine. Stacey, you best not let Mama see you with it. You know how she feel about knives. I nodded. As I did, Stacey bent and kissed my forehead. Boy, you all right? You feeling feverish or something? Stacey walked back to his room and turned at the door. I'm fine, Cassie. Now you just be careful with that knife, you hear? I nodded again. Now go on back in and pull the latch." "You sure you're all right?" "I'm sure. Go on now," he said, and watched me until I closed the door. I slipped the latch, then heard Stacey's door close. Clutching the penknife in my hand, I went back to the pallet where I had a few minutes to examine the knife before I heard Big Ma coming and had to put it under my pillow. I just couldn't get over the fact that Stacey had actually given the knife to me. I tossed and turned for a while, wondering why he had, and finally decided that if this was a new kind of phase Stacey was going through, I hoped it would last for a while. In the morning, we found the note. Written in Stacey's sprawling, awkward hand, it said, "Dear Mama, I know y'all ain't gonna understand this, but I gotta go. I found me a job, pay $8 a week. Problem is, I gotta leave here to get it. Mr. Morrison, I know he take good care of things. Don't nobody worry about me now. I'll be just fine. Your son, Stacey. I love all of y'all." And that is the end of chapter 9. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his